All right. Good evening, everybody. Would like to welcome you to our most recent addition to Brother to Brother Living Well. This edition is coming out of the Mental Health International Mental Health Committee. We are excited and pleased about the speaker that you will be engaged with later. But before we begin, I think first and foremost, we would like to begin with some words coming from our International Director of Social Action, Brother Malwan Johnson. Brother Johnson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brother Brown, and welcome everyone to another edition of our Living Well Brother Brother Speaker Series. Thank you for joining. You could be anywhere tonight, but you decided to join into this informative conversation. You know, when I started, where I had the vision to start this mental health committee, it was doing programs like this, Mental Health 101. I just think that in a Black community or Black and Brown community, we don't talk enough. And so I always like to say it's okay to not be okay. And so I think that this is a start in our ongoing conversation and dialogue around mental health. You know, the goal of a champion is identifying someone who is lifted up and advocating for mental health awareness in our communities. The champion is not necessarily one who is, necessarily credentialed, but is an embodiment and or an inspiration of positive mental health state. It can be their work, but it also needs to be their community service as well. And a champion, in my opinion, is willing to share their insights as a means to uplift and assist out, the communities that we serve as chapters and men of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And we need to have a better understanding and grounding in all the various aspects of mental health. And so with that said, it is my honor and it's also my pleasure as your International Director of Social Action to uplift our good brother, Charles M. Harper Sr., as our mental health champion of 2022. These champions and these awards that I feel like I'm giving out is to just identify and give brothers their flowers as they can smell them, as we say. And so, Brother Harper, I'm sure that you're going to give us an informative presentation tonight, and I look forward to hearing what you have to talk about with Mental Health 101. Thank you, Brother Brown.
I am deeply humbled to be the inaugural recipient of this recognition, and I'll do my best to keep enduring and showing, through my own modeling, how we can better grasp and understand and move forward, with understanding how mental health really affects our whole lives. So thank you very much.
Brother Harper, we over here popping bottles for you.
Absolutely. And I will say that while we're doing this on this, we keep them popping bottles, man. And like we're doing it in this space, but trust and assured that we will elevate you at Conclave as well, Brother Harper. So congratulations again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So, Brother Harper, with that, before we make the floor yours, we wanted to do just a little bit of housekeeping, right? Because these events don't happen in a vacuum, right? So I would like to recognize all of the individuals that serve on the International Mental Health Committee, and then also say to brothers and to some sorors that might be in this space, if they are interested in serving on the Mental Health Committee, opportunities are available. So at this point in time, because I think we always have to say them by name, because we usually say this is the committee, but I want to make sure that everybody knows who the committee is. And we have Brother Kevin Holder, we have Brother James Jefferson, we have Brother Travis Tatum, we have Brother Barry Walston. Like, these individuals have been the glue, I'm going to say the gorilla glue. Like, these are the individuals that literally have been helping us trying to figure out what this is going to look like, right? And when we talk about the what is, we're looking at, like, we've been very steadfast in trying to promote monthly mental health observations, right? So, because the way that we look at it is, this can be outreach to the brothers, this could be outreach to brothers and the families, This could be outreach to brothers in the community. This could also be outreach to our Sigma Betas. So we are always trying to figure out how we can uplift certain observances with that intent, just to engage. The other thing that we said that we wanted to make sure that we did is had these courageous conversations. Brother Harper, you will probably understand that we can't make anybody feel safe. I
Correct.
cannot tell you that this is a safe conversation, because our views and our values and our disposition on safety might look way different.
Absolutely.
But we can say that we're going to have a conversation that hopefully will stretch your understandings, right?
Absolutely.
And-
Absolutely.
And oftentimes give definition to things that you didn't like, that you already knew, but that you just didn't have the word for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And I think you just made a crucial point, you know, to feel psychologically safe. You know, when we say safe spaces, that's really what we're saying. You know, do I feel safe enough to share something that that is personal to me, without a fear of retribution or ridicule or judgment? And that's a personal choice for each individual to make. And the best that we can do is be trauma informed in our mindset when people choose to enter these spaces, and recognize that we're all just human beings trying to sort this thing out the best way that we can. And if we accept that authentic person in that space, then I think that helps facilitates that safe space.
And I think when we talk about this, like, we can talk about authenticity, we can talk about validation, we can talk about just simply active listening, right? And sometimes
Absolutely.
we can talk about being present. The whole notion
Mhm.
might not have to say anything,
Anything at all.
but just
Absolutely.
my presence to let you know that even though I'm not saying anything, I heard everything that you said.
Right. Right.
And I think last but not least, when we developed this hoping that we would find mental health champions, right? Individuals that when we saw them, right, that this wasn't a shtick, that this wasn't, you know, for developing their 501c3, right? But that
Right.
individuals that literally were just lifting up the conversation in their own space, right? So before I get Barry to introduce you, I need to tell people how you got into this space. Because you got into this space. I simply came across you because you had one of your pill bottles.
Yes. Yes.
I sat there and I was like, yo, what is this brother doing? So then I started looking at your posts, right? And when I found out about you, and you know, I was like, you know, I had no shame in my game. I was like, hey bro, how are you?
Very softly.
Tell me a little
Trauma informed.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, and the whole thing is that, you know, and I know people are going to be like, well, how do I become a mental health champion? And for me, it's going to be like, we're looking for mental health champions. Simply that's because of who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I had no awareness of the existence of this until you reached out to me.
Oh, no. But understand that was by intent, right?
Yeah.
Because let's talk about it. Sometimes when you put things out there, people want the things, but it's like,
Oh, sure.
we're not giving this out, but we're acknowledging those people that are in our spaces that are doing the work. So now here's one of our big goals, Brother Harper, and we haven't really talked about this, but at some point in time, because you know, you got to have this big goal. And we were like,
Absolutely,
wouldn't it be nice if we had a Sigma mental health professional directory?
It would be amazing. Amazing.
Wouldn't it be nice if a brother or a soror who was looking for who was in some level of crisis, and they knew that as a part of their psychological safety, it would be a blessing, and that they could speak to someone who had similar ilk in some way, shape, or form. Right.
Yeah. And when you think about the fraternity and our sisters, I think what better space to start in if you feel that you need to reach out to somebody than somebody that you're fraternally or constitutionally bounded to to enter the doorway of trying to say, I'm not okay. I don't know really what's going on, but I need to speak with somebody who can at least I can trust going through the door. And I think this is just an amazing creation of that space for everybody in our fraternity and our sisters, our sorors. Absolutely.
And this sits with our priorities, right? It takes a minute, but it's, just because things don't gain traction doesn't mean that it's not important.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
So the last thing I'm gonna ask Brother Barry to introduce you, and then sir, the floor is yours. So I am going to thank you. I'm just going to say thank you now, because I know I'm going to say thank you at the end. But I do wish to say, on behalf of the International Mental Health Committee, I wish to acknowledge and celebrate you on being our first mental health champion. And
Wow.
I'm willing to be blessed and encouraged for this next 35 minutes.
I'm deeply moved. Deeply moved.
Right.
Thank you.
Great.
Barry, who is this gentleman, Charles?
Thank you.
Who is
Brother-
Charles Harper? Who is Charles Harper, Barry? Tell us who
Brother
Harper
Charles.
is.
Yes, Brother Charles M. Harper, Senior, PhD student, MBA, CDP, is currently the Diversity and Inclusion Manager for the Mental Health and Mental Retardation of Tarrant County. And he has been a diversity and inclusion professional for over a decade. He is a certified U.S. history educator. He's published 4 books. He has served in the U.S. Navy veteran and spent 13 years as a local 150 operating engineer. And good brother, thank you for your service and happy belated Veterans Day, which you're still a veteran. So happy
Absolutely.
Veterans Day today. After which he had a severe spinal injury that resulted from 2009 construction accident that he will share with us. The interesting thing is that he was pursuing a doctorate of psychology at the University of Arizona for 2 years, and he changed course, and now he's in his second year, a PhD student in business management at the Kapala University, which I'm sure there's some psychology around that. So it's all
Absolutely.
good. Yes,
Yeah,
it is. More importantly, Brother Charles M. Harper Sr. is a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated in the
Blues,
in the Iota Mu Sigma chapter in Arlington, Texas. He crossed in the fall of 2019 as a member of the Theta Mu Sigma chapter in Dallas, Texas. Brother Harper, we appreciate you, we value you, and we love you, brother. And thank you so much for giving us your gift and your lived experience. It's on you.
Wow. I'm gonna say thank you again. It's humbling to be received, to be authentically received, and that leads us actually into what I'm going to present tonight, because my journey is based in emotion, and most of our dealings and conflict reside in that realm, from the interpretation of our feelings by our emotions to either welcome in love or to push away all to help us feel safe. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can really get into this. What we're going to talk about. Yes.
Charles, as you pull your slides up, let me just ask you a real quick question as you prep your slides.
Yes.
Why do you think mental health is such a hard topic to tackle with Black males, or in the Black,
I think,
or
yeah,
in communities of color? Like why is it so difficult? In
my humble opinion, and I'm trying to get this slide up here. In my humble opinion, I think the biggest thing that we deal with is everything from toxic masculinity to, identifying what is masculine. How am I masculine in my own space? And trying to get this slide to go here.
Just
You know,
click from beginning.
Okay, there we go. Slideshow. There it is. There we go. So you know, the biggest barrier, and I'll speak from personal experience, the biggest barrier that I faced was I was raised to be a strong-minded male, right? And males are supposed to be non-emotional. We're supposed to pull our boots up by our bootstrap, and we grind through. And when you say "I feel," it comes off as, "Oh, you must be weak." And because not just in our own culture, our own Black and brown culture, but even in the United States, the idea of us being a marginalized community and having to work twice as hard, well, then I have to twice mask myself, because if I don't, and I say there's something going on and I'm not okay, now I'm perceived as not just weak, but can this person think? Can this person hold a job? Can this person lead a family? So all these things come into question. And then on top of that, the perception of us by those that we seek to be loved by. Will they see us, especially our female, will they see us as strong? Or if we say, "I'm feeling depressed today," "Oh, you must be weak, and I cannot rely on you to hold this family as the rock." And so I think those compounding factors, especially in my life, was what made me resistant so long for to seek to find out, you know, to get my life out of that endless spiral that too many of us we feel locked into. And by the time we come up for some air, we're already being pushed back down under the water. And so I think that's really it.
Let me tell you this before you get started. So I got a whole series off of just that comment, right? So I caught toxic masculinity.
Yes.
I caught shame.
Shame.
I caught guilt.
Absolutely.
I caught psychological safety.
Safety. Yes.
And the inability to express your authentic self without being minimalized.
Absolutely. Or made to feel inferior.
Man, 2023 is going to be hard when we get these little vignettes out, man. You just got a whole lot of work coming your way.
Well, this is my passion. This is my passion. And it started before I held the medication that I take so that I can better manage my mental health. It started long before that, and we're going to get into that just in a little bit in here, because I feel from my perspective, the best way that I've been able to connect with people and enter these spaces is to be vulnerable. And I do lead with vulnerability. And so I'm gonna be vulnerable tonight, and I hope that it's well received.
All right.
So
do we want to do any ground rules before we get started?
Absolutely. So I want to say that we know from, we're going to talk about a little bit of trauma in here, not deep at all, but a little bit of trauma. And we know that sometimes hearing about trauma can bring feelings up that we may not have known were there. And then hearing about trauma can also sometimes create a traumatic experience for the listener. And so I want to say to everybody listening to this, that if you feel that you're becoming not okay, it's okay to step away. It is okay to call someone that you trust. If you have feelings that come to the surface later, reach out to, if you don't have a professional counselor that you're already seeing, there are plenty of free resources, including our fraternity, where you can reach out, connect with someone, and share those feelings. So the last thing that we want you to do is bottle those feelings up, because they become a kettle bomb, and they tend to come out at the worst possible moment. So I just want to put that that precursor out there, and so that everyone feels comfortable and has a choice. So without further ado, this topic of EQ, or emotional intelligence, became very important to me in my personal journey. Understanding how my early childhood trauma impacted how my emotions respond to situations, how they respond to my feelings interpreting what was going on around me. And so I want to level set, because I always think it's good when we're bringing in these academic words, but we want to keep it very, very low level. I think it's good to start out with some kind of definition. So what is this thing, emotional intelligence? I will say that emotional intelligence is not a touchy-feely subject. It's a tool that we use and with the understanding that we cannot stop an emotion from occurring. It is impossible. It's our brain has, and this, and we'll get into this in the limbic system and so forth, but our emotions are our body's response to either protect us or to let us know that we're safe. And so this emotional intelligence, or EQ, emotional quotient, what it is an awareness of the emotions that we're feeling and the emotions that we see and sense in others. And we're just trying to become more intelligent about that. So that in simple terms. So what I want us to do first is I want us to think and speculate for a second. Are we critical thinkers, right? Are we individuals as human beings? Do we feel that we are thinking beings and we react with emotion? Or are we emotional beings who happen to think? Now, in my personal journey, I had to learn that my fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, and we probably all know what fight, flight, and freeze is. Fawn is the appeasement, right? This response was misaligned because my early childhood trauma made my nervous system overly reactive. So I think it's important that we take a video and kind of it's about 2 minutes long. Let's see what this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn system really is in the most simplest way.
Humans, like all species, have self-protective mechanisms to help us survive. Our fight, flight, or freeze survival response, the FFF for short, is designed to mobilize our brain and body to fight an enemy, run from an avalanche, or freeze to hide from a predator. Our brain sometimes misinterprets safe situations as dangerous and can set off false alarms. When the amygdala, our brain's watchdog, senses and barks danger, our body enters survival mode quicker than our rational mind can react, leaving it trying to figure out why we feel in mortal danger. When the FFF alarm is sounded, we start to breathe more quickly and shallow, causing hyperventilation, and our heart starts beating very fast. These changes can cause strong chest pain, which many people interpret as symptoms of a heart attack, when in fact it's just a result of the FFF activation, which can be relieved through breathing exercises. As a way of getting you ready for action, blood is diverted towards the major muscle groups. Blood flows away from our digestive system, causing the bladder to relax, and we might feel the need to pee. The mouth goes dry, nausea can occur, and we get the butterflies feeling in our stomach. Blood also rushes from extremities, leaving us with cold hands, but often sweaty palms as the action-ready body starts sweating to avoid overheating. Legs and hands can start trembling and feel weak, while tension starts building in big muscles like the thighs, neck, and shoulders. In our head, FFF alarms cause our brain to focus on negative memories, probably so it can scan them to avoid danger and negative outcomes. We get tunnel vision as our pupils dilate to increase our focus and long vision, but as a result, we lose our peripheral vision. FFF activation also reduces our ability to recognize differences in facial expressions. Too much oxygen and too little CO2 can result in dizziness or lightheadedness, which many people interpret as signs that they might faint. But because fainting is caused by a drastic drop in blood pressure, and because the FFF increases both our heart rate and blood pressure, it's nearly impossible to faint when this happens. Over time, depression, anxiety, and high levels of stress all harm the brain's ability to slow or cancel false FFF activations, causing them to happen more often. Knowing the symptoms of false activations makes it easier to recognize and reduce their effects. At Tanki Boxing, you can learn both bottom-up and top-down techniques to reduce false FFF activation and bring your body.
So what is this telling us? Let's simplify this. What is this actually telling us? Well, it's telling us that we're not thinking machines as we feel we are. We're feeling machines that think. Now, how does this relate to mental health? Well, most of us experience some kind of trauma in our lives. And the statistics say that anywhere from 60 to 90% of people have experienced trauma, and if we consider the impact of COVID, we could literally say that 100% of people have experienced some level of trauma. Now, without getting too deep, some of us are more resistant to trauma, and some of us are more susceptible to trauma. We're all unique individuals we have these shared experiences, but how our body processes it is all unique to our individual selves. And so I just want to put a visual in the most simplest way out there so that we can understand how this works. Now, this is all located in the limbic system, which is a very old system, part of our brain. It's the part of our brain that protects us from danger, as the video said. Now, if you have experienced a lot of trauma in your life, your brain, specifically your hippocampus, where your emotions and your long-term memories are stored, well, when your senses in this prefrontal cortex, when your senses sense something, it asks this hippocampus if we recognize it and is it dangerous or not? And if that hippocampus can't answer that question, it triggers our amygdala, and pretty soon, for a perfect example, when we get into a passionate argument with a loved one, often what we begin arguing about is not, we can't even remember at the end of it what we began to argue about, because that hippocampus and the amygdala is reducing our ability to critically think. And so the next image that I put up, to simplify it, the front of the brain, we could just think of that as the thinking brain. This is where our reason, our logic, our rationalism comes from. And then in the middle of the brain is our emotional brain. And so I say it's important to remember that the more bad stress we experience, the more it reduces our ability to critically think. And so that old adage, never make a big decision in a stressful moment, that's where that rings true, and science reinforces that. So just remember, if you are experiencing a lot of negative stress, what you feel you are thinking may not necessarily be reality or sound logic that you're using at all. And that's why sometimes later, after we've had a high emotional moment, we look back at what happened and we have regret. And so, but what causes this? Well, from my experience, I've experienced ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. Now, if you're not wealthy, and we're talking making $450,000 a year or more, then you've probably experienced poverty. Poverty is one of the adverse childhood experiences, because the reason that it is because we don't have access to resources. And other issues, adverse childhood experience, or ACEs, can be anything from you've witnessed trauma, someone's passed away, traumatic brain injuries, fetal alcohol syndrome. You've grown up as a product of someone, your mother intaking alcohol. All these are contributors to your ability to manage stress, which impacts our mental health. So if you've experienced any of that, I would recommend at least checking in. We do physical check-ins once a year. We should get into the habit of doing a mental health check-in once a year with a professional licensed counselor, not our friend. I would like to say go to your friend, but your friend is biased. They're not always going to be the most objective. We want to go to a licensed professional counselor, and Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated is creating a space for our own professionals to be there to service our own members. So as we move forward, understanding the impact of ACEs, I want to share a little bit of my story and how I got into this space where I wanted to understand. So I was born in Cook County Hospital, Chicago, Illinois, and anybody from Chicago, whether you're from the West Side, South Side, or well, not necessarily North Siders, they don't really come down to Cook County, but the rest of us, we know Cook County. It's John H. Stroger Hospital now. So I was born there. I have a white mother, a Black father, both in poverty. And we moved from, we went from there and we lived in the city of Robbins, which is on the South Side and is probably one of the poorest Black communities in the state of Illinois. And from there, we moved to Dixmoor. Now, something very significant happened to me during this time. My parents were in poverty, both parents trying to work. They availed me to the neighborhood babysitter. And on several experiences, I was a victim of child sexual abuse by a teenager in that neighborhood. And oftentimes people who are victimized, they're silent, and especially in the communities of color where spare the rod, spoil the child is acting out because of experiencing the abuse, and the parent is disciplining the reaction to the abuse. So it's a compound situation, which often triggers what's called toxic stress disorder, or the child is overstimulated with stress. And this is what impacts our nervous system, which identifies danger. And so I developed a deep sense of shame, which meant I felt unworthy to be loved all the way into my 40s. And I also have this deep fear, I had a deep fear of abandonment, which meant that I was always scared for someone to leave. And so in relationships, I would manipulate and lie in order to keep them close to me for fear that they would abandon me, which that goes back to childhood and not being quote unquote saved, even though my parents were doing their best. They didn't realize what was going on. And so I had to work through that resolve to not blame them or be mad at them for what occurred to me. Everyone was doing their best, but I carried this trauma into the service. And here's where we get into the toxic masculinity. I'm 6'2", I'm athletic, 16 years of Taekwondo. I go into the Navy, and all this, what we identify as masculinity is applauded. Not losing control necessarily, but the bravado of it, the toughness of it is applauded, and it reinforces that negative reward system that this is how I'm going to deal with this, by just being angry. I'm going to peacock, right? As males do, I'm going to take up space. And in doing that, we're perpetuating our own trauma, and we're also traumatizing those who love us. And so I moved into construction after the Navy, and as the brother said, what ended up happening in 2009, I had I injured my back on a job. I had to have spinal reconstruction surgery, which is the photo that you see now. Now I'm adding trauma on top of trauma. I identified as a Black male with a white mother in construction. That ended. In 2015, while doing the play Black and White: A Man Divided, I found out that I had an issue with the vertebrae in my neck. And so I had to have a plate put in my neck. And while they did that, I suffocated on my own blood, and I actually coded on the operating room table. I flatlined on the operating room table. And so that's that picture there. So this last picture, this semicolon, this was my emotional bottom. This is when I realized that I did not have control of how I managed my emotions, and it was undermining my ability to make good decisions in my life. And in 2018, I chose to attempt to take my life. And so that's what the semicolon represents, is where my life was going to stop, but it didn't. And so that was the point that I said, I can't do this anymore. And from that point, I went into therapy, intense therapy for several years, so that I could get to the root of what was causing my fear of abandonment and causing my feeling of being unworthy to be loved. And that brings us to where we're at now. The medication bottle that I held up, it helps me regulate myself so that I can manage my emotions so that I can engage and have a full life now. So let's look at this triangle for a minute. And if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it has a similar triangle to it. So there's 4 steps to it, and it looks simple, but I guarantee you it's not. It takes practice, practice, practice. This is a tool. This is not something we're born with. This is something that I had to learn, and that I love sharing so that others can try to learn it as well. So let's look at it for a minute. So the first level is self-awareness. What am I? What is the emotion I am experiencing? Am I angered as a response to a stimulus? Because our feelings are our interpretation, our emotions are a response. So what is my response? Am I angry? Am I happy? Am I sad? So I need to become aware of where my emotional state is. And then the next level is what I really worked hard at, and I continue to work hard at, is self-management. What do I do with this emotion? Do I take in deep breaths and blow them out? Do I practice mindfulness, meditation? Do I visit a therapist? I was visiting a therapist once a week for 2.5 years. So that's the management part, right? And then directing that. It is no one else's fault or responsibility for my emotions. That's my responsibility. And I cannot impose that on others. And so I must be sure not to direct whatever that emotion is towards those that are undeserving of it. And that was most of my life. It was, you're making me feel this way. You're causing me to be angry. I'm reacting to what you're causing. And I had to learn that that is incorrect. I have to manage these emotions. And then last, empathy. How did my emotions impact those around me? And did I make a concerted effort to reconnect with them so that they understand that how I was feeling was not their responsibility? So in that, I want to play this next video. And it's even more relatable to what happens actually with our brain and how we see things when we're in that anger space, because that's what most of us males use as our coping mechanism, is anger. So let's look at this for one moment.
Anger, like fire, can be good at times, but it can also destroy the longer we hold on to it, ravaging relationships and lives. Why do we have it? And why is its grip so powerful? Hi, I'm Peter Montoya from Thrive Union, and I'll be sharing our current thinking on anger as part of our How the Brain Works series. Anger developed to help us react quickly to protect ourselves. It arises primarily from an ancient portion of our brain called the amygdala, which triggers automatic responses when we're threatened, commonly known as fight, flight, or freeze. When distinguishing a threat, the amygdala activates the hypothalamus, which tells our pituitary glands to release the hormones like the stress chemical cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. Before we're even aware, our body is flooded with hormones and neurotransmitters that shoot up our heart rate, energize our muscles, and increase blood pressure, all to get us ready to fight. Systems like digestion and vision are limited, along with our prefrontal cortex, which controls reasoning. Our hippocampus quiets, reducing short-term memory and new memory formation. All this makes us impulsive decision makers who may say harsh words we don't remember after the fact. These reactions helped our ancestors survive wild animal attacks, but the long-term effects ravage our modern bodies. Too much anger compromises our brains and creates high blood pressure, heart disease, and compromised immune systems. Worse, the amygdala has trouble distinguishing modern slights from imaginary threats. So how do we manage our anger? Brain scans of murderers show damaged or less active prefrontal cortexes, showing that one key way to combat anger is to strengthen that area. But can you grow gray matter? Yes. Research shows that meditation has been shown to both shrink the amygdala and grow the prefrontal cortex. Research also shows that venting or suppressing anger actually builds it. Instead, mindfully observe your feelings or try reframing them. Imagine learning that the driver who cut you off just lost their child. Your anger would likely immediately turn into compassion. Our imagination can trigger the amygdala or quiet it. Try creating stories that reframe an offender's actions when there is no real threat. And don't forget meditation. Meditation is by far and away the best practice for reducing all recurring negative emotions. Changing how we approach our anger literally changes our brains. It frees us from the tyranny of automatic responses and helps us enjoy greater health, longevity, and fulfillment so we can thrive.
Thrive Union is a real-world.
And so I want to leave you with this. So when we're in upsetting or stressful situations, when they arise, pay attention to how you feel. Your body is automatically, before you can even consider it, it's already reacting. And we want to make sure, are my emotions appropriately reacting to the situation that I find myself in? We want to make sure that we ask loved ones, family and friends, hey, what's your perception of me when I react to you saying something that I may not agree with? What are you saying? And rather than become defensive, let's take that in and really consider it for a moment. And then, like the video said, mindfulness. I use mindfulness. I do remap how I perceive things. So I don't have road rage now. 10 years ago, I was a completely different Charles. But nowadays, I don't get stressed about those things because I realize they're human too, and they're going through their human emotions, whatever that may be. And I don't want to play into that. And I'll say in closing that I'm at the part of my journey where I'm reconciling with those that I've affected over my life with what I had untreated. And so this includes my kids. I have one child that is still grasping, well, two of them grasping with who dad is now versus who dad was. And so I have to give them patience and tolerance and love and just be consistent with my growth until they can see me again. So I'll leave you with that. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope that something that I presented to you triggers you into wanting to explore not just this information more, but your own mind and your mental health more. So thank you.
Brother Harper, I'm just going to say, wow, right? So I'm going to hold off on my comments because there are some questions.
Okay.
One of the questions is, will you be willing or are you going to be sharing the slides?
Absolutely. This is information that I think everyone should just have. So absolutely.
So we will try to make sure that the slides along with the recording are placed in Blueprint. Okay. Brother Jefferson, you have your hand raised.
Yes, sir, Brother Brown. And Brother Harford, let me first say that, I definitely enjoyed your slide. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. That's a lot to, be able to share that and be, open with us, for the good of mankind and things like that. But I was just wondering if you could kind of just touch a little bit more on the importance of maybe role modeling some of this important intelligence or these emotional intelligence, because I think what I see a lot, just kind of working in the profession is, we often talk about emotional intelligence. We try to learn it for ourselves, but a lot of times we still struggle to role model that to our children, to have to be that strong parent, to have to say that, I can't cry in front of my kids, to say that, I can't show them this side of me. And I think it is actually one of those generational curses
Yes.
that we really often overlook, where we just have to always be that strong person. And though we talk about it, we learn it, we try to teach it, the fact that we're not role modeling it is still a hindrance to our children and the generations behind us being able to really completely understand it. And so, I mean, if you have any tips for that, being able to really just understand how to be vulnerable in front of our children, to show them that it's okay to cry, or to allow them to not be okay, you know, as men, adults, Black people in general. I'm just looking for maybe some tips that could be really helpful for that and the importance of that as well.
Well, what I've done is not for everybody. And what I decided to do was to be vulnerable and teach my kids what was going on with my mental health, and walk them through that. And when I have bouts of depression even now, and I share that with my children, and I share that, and they know that dad's a strong dude. You know, they know dad can get with it. But I also let them see that it's more courageous to be vulnerable than to fight the problem with anger or to just let it fester. And so I attempt to model patience. I attempt to model vulnerability. I attempt to model, this is how I'm feeling. And I want you to know that how I'm feeling is not a result of anything that you're doing. And I repeat this over and over and over, and it takes practice. So I think the biggest thing is, if we want to systemically change that generational curse, I think it becomes incumbent upon us to be educated about what's going on with our minds. We know everything about our body, right? We know if we sprain our ankle, what to do, but we don't know how to reconcile an emotion. So I think it's incumbent upon us to become more educated, and then to practice modeling. And then when we fail, be vulnerable about failing. You know, hey son, I shouldn't have got upset with you. That was me reacting in anger, and that was not your fault. And I think if we can do that consistently, I think hopefully we'll break that curse.
And if I can, Brother Harper, just your feelings about this, because I think sometimes there's a pre-step before you decide to model, right? So when you wish to make that change, I think some of us sit in the space, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, and we say to ourselves, is what we are about to do, is that in competition with my family tradition?
Mm.
Is it in conflict with my societal expectation? Right. So I'm not saying that this is really big, but like you used the word earlier in the beginning when you were talking about being trauma informed. And
Yes.
and oftentimes I say that anytime, you know, not to use these really multisyllabic words, but anytime someone goes that trauma informed, that trauma sensitive route, it is truly the opposite of any teaching or learning that you were ever
It
given.
absolutely is. It absolutely is.
So you are literally rewriting yourself, and then people will say, well, what was wrong with the way that I raised you?
And to make it even clearer, we have to understand what being trauma informed means. That I speak to someone understanding the high prevalence of trauma, and that I'm going to be emotionally aware of how they are reacting to my engagement with them. And when I become aware that there's a shift at that point, and that's why emotional intelligence is so important in this, is that I'm going to stop, because whatever I was talking about, as long as it's not life or death, whatever I was talking about becomes secondary to reconnecting with that individual and supporting them emotionally. Being aware of our emotions is not a weakness. Being aware of what our emotions are playing in our lives. We are emotional creatures. We've survived millions of years using the emotion, but we're not in the hunter-gatherer days anymore, where we have to go hunt our food and there's no street lights, so we have to be heightened to a sense of sound that's unfamiliar. We're in a technologically age where we are more civilized. And so it becomes, I think, more important for us to recognize managing my emotions gives me more control to make better decisions. And so I have to say, am I mimicking what my father did to me? Or did I think this through in how I'm going to engage my son or my daughter or my wife or my husband? I have choice. And I think that is the part that you're getting to, is recognizing, is this the choice I'm making, or am I modeling what was modeled for me? And at that point, you have to make that differentiation.
Absolutely. And I would have to say, we would not have been here for more than 45 minutes if Brother Walston hadn't changed his virtual background. So he likes to try to sneak it in. But Brother Walston, you had a very beautiful question before we go back to Brother Jefferson. You had a question in the chat that I'm just going to ask if you could lift up in this space.
So yes, this is my mental wellness, Brother Charles. That's what I do for mental wellness.
Okay.
Yes, he
So,
he changes his virtual backgrounds like nobody's business.
Everybody needs their coping mechanism.
Yes, as we think about our lived experience as Black men, and I get all that you have said, we just had 3 homicides of Black men. And sometimes you could just be having good mental health, right? And just be walking down the street and it's gone.
Absolutely.
And so as we think about, your techniques you talked about, which was mindfulness, I think are there other practical strategies that you've seen in your lived experience? One, as a professional; 2, as a brother, a member of Sigma, Phi Beta Sigma, because there are some brothers that I've met that they have are struggling, and they are doctors, lawyers, and have all the credentials.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And again, it is about how do we build community, and how do we craft and reframe this relationship, the way we think about mental wellness and taking, I don't yet like to use self-care, creating a healthier experience for yourself.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I learned in therapy, because I wasn't on board with mindfulness and I did meditation and martial arts, but I was preparing to go into combat in the ring, but I wasn't into mindfulness. And so how I moved into the space to practice mindfulness was leaning into my earlier experience in creativity. Creativity is when we talk about treatment for PTSD, they're finding that accessing that creative process in whatever capacity. I sing. Literally, my meditation is I'll go through 2 hours of singing, and that's my meditation. That's my release, right? That's how I recharge my ability, my stress capacity is through my creative outlet. And so, what I would encourage is whatever your hobby is. And we've got brothers that hike, we have brothers who sing, we have artists, we have all these creative and physical outlets. Those are the spaces that I think create that bonding moment so that we can be vulnerable. Hey, brother, the other day, this happened in my life and I'm feeling like this. And then it becomes the brotherly duty to not judge or dismiss, but to validate at that point. And that's how we as brothers and sisters can create a feeling of connection and safety. Instead of ridiculing or lambasting, we validate and actively listen.
So what I heard is simple things that we could do tomorrow is just affirming those around us and pairing the affirmations with active listening.
Absolutely.
So, Brother Harper, I like to celebrate people that share their video, right? So, Brother Bailey just put on his video. Brother Jefferson, I see you. But Brother Bailey, I'm just wondering, since you are sharing your video now, did you have a question or a comment for Brother Harper?
Thank you, Brother Brown. I haven't been to a lot of these things lately and stuff like that because I've been dealing with my own personal mental health and everything. And I saw this in the group chat and I was like, oh, let me just join in and everything. So like, because I personally deal with PTSD and everything. And it's really hard sometimes to like open up to people because sometimes well, one being a Caribbean male, it's like
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
in the family just shuts you down already.
Quick.
And they're just like, you know, just deal with it. Like you got this and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the things I found out that makes me like happy and makes me more alive than ever is to like do art and actually draw and paint and do like wood carvings and stuff like that. And I like probably shed like 3 tears once you was talking about your story, because it was very similar to mine, even though I'm only 24 at the moment. But like, I understand like almost like committing suicide and stuff is like very touchy in the Black community and stuff. And I really do commend you for being here and commend you for actually like enlightening everybody about like your story and your your life.
Well, I want to support you and affirm how you're feeling. You know, suicide is the leading cause of death in males. One of the highest leading cause, and it's because of the culture, right? And one thing that I did have to learn is, even though I lean into my vulnerability, I choose who I'm going to be vulnerable with. And I watch before I'm vulnerable. I watch, and if it's that you know, a lot of us we call it toxic masculinity now. Before it used to be the male bravado. When I see too much of that, and I feel like this is a person I have nobody else to talk to, I ask them permission before I share, and I say, hey, you know, I'm feeling a certain kind of way, and I need to get something, and I create my boundaries. I say, I want to share with you. I do trust you, but I want to share, and I just want you to listen. Is that okay? And I assign accountability to them by asking them, is it okay if I share before I share? Because if this is my friend, even if, you know, I mean, you know, even if they're from the hood, from the South Side, and they're all thuggish and everything, if this is your guy, or your girl, even, you know, your home girl, and you assign that accountability and they're your friend, most of the time I've had positive reactions with that. So that's one thing that I learned through a lot of error, is be appropriately vulnerable to those that are gonna return that connection to you, and not invalidate or cause you to feel inferior because you shared. Because that's what happened to me. And that cycle, it took me deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole until everything stressed me out and I hit that emotional rock bottom. And I'm gonna say, on the other side of that, what I'm dealing with now is, now that I am vigilant about my mental health, I've had to make hard decisions about who I share in my space, family, friends, or otherwise, because they will perceive you now as the outcast. And that, I think that's something that we're going to have to eventually talk about too, is what do you do after you've done a lot of healing from your trauma and you're venturing into, because the world looks colorful now, and now you want to experience life, but those that were with you or a part of your journey can't necessarily go where you're going anymore, because now they're more damaging to you. So I think that's another conversation we should have.
So, Brother Harper, I caught 3 things: vulnerability, agency, and choice.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So,
thank you, Professor.
I am active listening, sir. I am active listening, and I am affirming. So, Brother Jefferson, I see your hand up. This will be the last question for this evening. After James's question, Brother Harper, we will then have some closing comments from Malwan. We can leave this space open just for a few minutes at least, for anybody that just wants to sit. And, you know, I never like the rushing off of the Zoom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, for the people that came late, Brother Harper, we can go back to Kirk Franklin. You know,
no doubt.
We can do something. So, Brother Jefferson.
Thank you, Brother Walston.
Yeah, no. Brother Brown, you got to chill. But first of all, I just want to say, first of all, Brother Bailey,
Wow.
we appreciate you being here. I don't know if y'all know, but I actually have some group chats with Brother Bailey. Brother Bailey's been out there feeding pizza to the homeless out there in the Penn Station, Rutgers area and stuff like that. He's really been trying to go ahead and get money and stuff. So he's really been out there doing some advocating of his own. I mean, he's really been
Wow.
feeding people. He's been posting his videos. So, I definitely think we should support that brother up there, out there. But Brother Harper, just kind of going back to what you're saying, like I know it's my last comment, but one of the things we kind of talked about, when we talked about the normalizing the conversation, the vulnerability, the role modeling, when it comes to things like our children or, our younger siblings or parents, we want to always see the innocence in these individuals, right? And so we feel like sometimes when we put these things on them, we're kind of either tainting them or we're kind of forcing them to grow up by kind of informing them, things like that. So in regards to you, I just want to know, what were some of the things that went through your minds or some of the steps that you took to begin yourself, to prepare yourself to kind of have those conversations with them, to tell them about, what mental health looks like with you, to let them know that, sometimes people deal with mental health and things like that, like some things that you did for yourself to kind of prepare yourself to have that moment with them, to be able to, educate them ultimately on what was going on in life and, their father, things like that.
Yeah, that was really rough. And the opportunity came when I noticed one of my children were doing some negative self-coping, and I recognized it, and that I took that opportunity to share. Was I scared? I was scared to death. Didn't know necessarily how they were going to react. But because I have the teaching background and, I have the formal education of what to do, but when it's somebody you love, that formal education almost goes out the window as far as, going down those certain steps. So what I did was I was resolute that I was not going to continue the cycle of generations of masking things that were going on with my mental health and affecting how I thought, how I could think, how I perceived reality. And so with that affirmation, I made certain before I shared with my children about what I had endured, that I was ready for that emotional load of how they may react, because they may react by shutting you down or shutting you out. And if that should happen, the next step I would encourage is family counseling at that point. And a person may want to have a counselor there when they share how they're feeling about what they may be enduring with their mental health with their child or spouse. They may need that support because they may not be able to articulate it in a way that's the most receptive to a child. So, but for me, it was, I was resolute that I was done letting my mental health create my life, and that I was going to educate my children as my gift to them, so that they would be at least armed with the knowledge and they would be empowered with choice. And so that's what I did. I affirmed and resolved that it was the best thing to do, regardless of how they react.
To me, that sounds even yet like another conversation down the road. Like how do we actually verbalize vulnerability to our loved ones, right?
Yeah, definitely a conversation. Definitely.
Thank you so much. At this time, Brother Johnson, do you have any closing comments?
Thank you, Brother Brown, and thank you, Brother Harper, for sharing your story, your passion. It was an awesome conversation for myself about how we affirm the space, emphasizing why the importance of writing your own narrative is essential to mental health. I think that was the theme. You definitely were on target and on point with that. I do want to remind folks that we will be having a round 2 of our Being in the Holidays coming up next month. So stay tuned for that. I don't know if I stole that from you, Brother Brown, but hey, I mean, we want to make sure that everyone on this call is sharing the good work that this committee is doing. I appreciate you, Brother Brown, for putting this on and spearheading the mental health committee from our international perspective and program. And so I would just say, as a part of word, just everybody, thank you for joining. Good night and God bless.
All right, if everyone could hold